and weather's really beautiful out there. And I'm a bit troubled. I watch the news quite a bit, not the stuff to the left, not the stuff to the right. So it's a little bit because there's not much in between. Everybody's got their opinions based on I have no idea what. So after watching the news a little bit and seeing what's going on in this country with our politics and all that, I'm going to talk about a little bit of stuff that I usually don't talk about. I come from a middle-class family in Seattle. When I listen to the news and they talk about defunding the police, or in Seattle they're making it so a lot of things that are crimes are no longer felonies. They don't prosecute anybody for anything anymore. They just turn them loose. They can go out and steal your stuff again, or maybe worse. Who knows? Whatever they want to do. It's kind of like it's an open playing field. So I grew up, like I said, in a middle-class neighborhood. Now, where I grew up, on our block, after we were kids, there were a whole bunch of kids because we're of that right after World War II bunch of kids. On my block alone, there were 2 kids that were convicted of murder. Thought it was kind of a normal life. I'll go back to, I was talking to Debbie not too long ago, and when I heard that they were talking about defunding the police and making crimes lesser crimes, and there's no punishment, and because of this COVID thing, they're releasing all these people from jail. Have you ever known any of those people? I have. And I wouldn't want them as neighbors. Or open borders, open immigration. Let me tell you, I had a automotive shop down in Kent, Washington, and it was in one of those tilt-up buildings where they have, you know, a bunch of garage doors and different businesses, and there was a body shop down at the end, and he moved out, and then these other folks moved in. They're Russians. I don't know if you know about the Russian mafia. Bad people. The ones I knew that were down at the end of my building, they would go buy cars, wrecked cars, at the auction. And then they'd have about 15 guys that they had bought the cars for out in the parking lot, hanging new parts on them. Some of these cars shouldn't have been on the road no matter what after they were wrecked, but that's not for me to decide. But they played the system. I'd stay in my office often at night because I didn't want to drive back and forth to work the 30 miles. And in order to get to the shops behind me, you had to drive by my office, and I'd be sleeping in there at night. And that's when the Russians got all their parts deliveries in the back of a pickup truck. They'd get fenders and doors and all kinds of stuff, and they were already painted, they were already the right color. I don't know if, I'm not very naive, but I know that they'd buy a car, and then in their system, they would put in an order for this color door, for this model car. And and the cars would go out and be sold. Usually they'd, after they had the new parts hung on them, they'd have some guy or some gal that was not Russian put an ad on Craigslist, and they'd meet someone in some parking lot and sell them on this car, and the people would buy it, not knowing they were driving around in a bunch of stolen doors and hoods and trunk lids, and it was illegal. And these were people that they were Russian, and there was one day that I forget who it was, if it was the FBI or customs people, but they had all the letters on the back of their jackets. They came in, drove by my shop, and went down to this other shop, and they took everybody away in wire ties. You know, they had their hands wire tied behind their back. And so a couple days later, I'm talking, because I used to do welding for these guys. They'd have to have some stuff welded, but they didn't even have a paint shop. Can you imagine a body shop that doesn't even have a paint shop? So I'm talking to the leader of the Russian mafia, that's what I call him, the Russian mafia down there. And I said to him, you know, I know what's going on here. You know what's going on here. Obviously, the government people know what's going on here. And I said, are you afraid of really getting busted big time and maybe being sent back to Russia or something like that? And he smiled at me, he says, in his Russian accent, or brogue, whatever you call it. He says, Bill, you don't understand. We were criminals in Russia. The reason we came here, what they do to criminals in Russia is not nice. But here, there's almost no punishment. I get busted, I'm back in the shop in 3 days, which I can attest to, because it was only a few days before that they were all busted, and now they were back out working in the parking lot building cars. My point is, there's a lot of people talking about defunding the police or doing this with the laws and softening everything up, and they haven't been out on the streets, especially the streets I have been on. We'll take a break here and I'll gather my thoughts. No coffee. Damn, I left my coffee cup downstairs. So, we were talking about the Russians. That's one deal. Not going to affect very many people. But when they talk about letting all these illegal aliens in, I'm just wondering how many of those are criminals, where they come from, or don't care about our laws. And now the laws that we had aren't even going to be laws anymore. They're just going to let these people do whatever they want. I'm not opposed to people who work hard for where they get in life. But I'm opposed to people being crooks and getting it. And I think that the wake-up call is, we should take a look at what's in our neighborhoods and who's making all these laws, these little people that haven't had exposure to the other side of the tracks. they're academics, I guess. They're not my people. I have no idea how they think, but I know that they haven't seen what I've seen, and if they have, they're idiots to try and defund police and things like that. I know that I was talking to Debbie the other day, and I said, you know, if people knew and have seen what I've seen, they wouldn't want to defund the police. They would probably give the police more money. Now, once in a while, police make mistakes. So what? We all do. I'm not saying it doesn't affect people, but you don't run things based on a mistake here and a mistake there. You try and rectify those rather than get rid of the whole system. So I'm talking to her, and we're talking about gun control, and I'm a gun guy, and I'm saying just only idiots would try and take our guns away. They haven't seen anything. And we're chatting, and I said, how can they do that? And she says, well, Bill, you've lived a different life than most people. And I said, yeah, I probably have, but based on just what I can come up with right now, I've known either been murdered or murderers. Think about that. And I've never even been in jail or nothing. I've just been exposed to some bad people. And I told Debbie, I said, I probably shouldn't say this. She doesn't like me telling people this, but screw it. When she was younger, 20, she lived at the bottom of Gatewood Hill in West Seattle. Her neighbor was Ted Bundy. And one day her car wouldn't start. And she asked him for a ride up to the Admiral District, which is 3 miles away. And he gave her a ride. And she rode in that little Volkswagen of his that he used to use to abduct people and take them out and rape them and slaughter them. And he was a bad guy. There's bad guys everywhere. Just don't be naive. And no one's going to take my guns away, because I know what's out there, especially people who are kind of snowflake people. As I was making this, I had to stop, and I wasn't really sure I wanted to share all this, because some of it's negative, some of it's awful. And I asked Debbie if it was all right if I mentioned her little encounter with Ted Bundy. And I cut out a portion of what I talked about, just because it might not be appropriate. God only knows one of the things I'm good at is being appropriate. So anyway, one of the parts that I cut out was when I talked about how many people I know that were either murderers or murdered. And I gave some examples. And we'll just leave that number at a solid 25. I did a survey once after talking to Debbie about that. I thought I lived a normal life, and she says, no, I don't think you have. I asked people, how many people did they have personal experience with, not just heard about, but how many have they interacted with in their lives that were either murderers or that they knew that were murdered. Most people say 0. I found that incredible. Absolutely incredible. Because I thought I'd been with the race cars and, you know, and the tow trucks and all that kind of stuff, and I guess she's right. I haven't been around normal stuff all the time in my life. So what else was I going to talk about when it comes to all this defunding the police and making stuff so it's not a crime anymore? I mentioned to you that I had a towing company for a while. I did mostly recovery work, which, and I liked going out at night. And let me tell you, around here, there's nothing good that happens after 2 o'clock in the morning. There's a whole bunch of people that you don't see during the day that are out. And I'm in I'm outside of a small town. I work small town area. A whole lot of people out at night that aren't out during the day. The meth addicts and the homeless and all that. And people who want to give their guns away don't know what's roaming around at night. The politicians that want to take our guns away obviously only sleep at night. They don't go roam the streets or ride in a tow truck. So I just thought I'd mention that. Since they're doing away with all these laws and making it so in the Seattle area, they want to make it so if someone steals and what they stole was a necessity of life, which is kind of open-ended, what is a necessity of life, it's not a crime anymore. So what they'll probably do, they'll go in and maybe do some of these at gunpoint. And then as they're running away, they throw away the gun. It's kind of like with the towing, when people would cause accidents, drive off the road intoxicated, they just throw away the keys and they're still standing there and they say, I wasn't driving. And if the police can't prove it, they might get public intoxication, which is maybe they give them a ticket. I don't know. If that, the cops don't want to be bothered with that crap. So when these people are going to be robbing, they can do it at gunpoint and maybe throw the gun. If they're smart, they'll wear rubber gloves so there's no prints. And they'll toss the gun after they've done the robbery and get off with no crime, because whatever they stole, money, that's a necessity, right? It's so stupid. But they'll toss the gun. So there's going to be, maybe we as regular citizens will be walking along and we'll stumble across a gun. Who knows, you know? Gun in the bushes, all this crime and guns. And so what I think they ought to do, instead of trying to take our guns away, we should all be educated in firearm safety. The government's trying to let people take our history away from us. So in high school, maybe there won't be any classes where kids study history anymore. Maybe we can fill that void with a gun safety class. So in order to graduate from high school, you've taken a class in firearm safety. You know how to shoot. It's something to think about. I mean, they just tore down a Robert E. Lee statue. Well, I'll tell you, that stuff is my history too. And I don't appreciate them just getting rid of it. And it upsets me. And I think people should be upset with what's going on. In Seattle, they let these people up in the Central District, there's this, it's on the national news, it's this Chaz where these kids that don't have jobs, live in their mom's basement, come out and take over an area of the city. And the city officials let them do it. I'll tell you what, I grew up in an era where we respected people's property. We respected people. We called adults by Mr. and Mrs. And I think that all these people that are doing all this property damage and rioting and scaring people, I think they should be dealt with sternly. But nobody's doing nothing. There's going to come a time when regular old folk like me might not put up with this anymore. And I think these people that are doing all the rioting and stuff, we need to make them scared. Okay? Take care. Oh, what I was going to say was, I don't know if I mentioned it, but there were the 2 kids on my block that were murderers. They murdered kids. And in my life, just off the top of my head, I can count 25 people I've known on a personal basis and interacted with them that were either murdered or they were murderers. Think about that. Want them on the street? Take care.